All right, Elena, let's go through your essay. So before we get started, um, I did not make you all do Emily format because you haven't learned it yet for whatever reason. But what I did do is I did put this into double space. Just I made it double space so it's easier for me to see, and I did put it into Times New Roman because the bold of the other font was a little much, and that's just how the font is automatically bolded, so it was just hurting my eyes a little bit. So let's talk about your essay start with hook. So your hook is actually one of the hooks if you look at your introduction and conclusion packet that I believe I passed out to your class. It's one of the introductions you do not want to use to start a paper. Since before we can remember, mass hysteria has been a problem and a mystery. You don't want to kind of have those vague introductions that are since before time began or since history began. It's just not an effective hook. All right. So, anyways, as I was talking about, my dad just called, so I had to pause this for like 10 minutes. Come back to it. So you don't really want to start with that kind of hook. And then as you get to here, people wonder how it occurs, what happens to the body, triggers. I'm not sure what you're referring to with triggers here, and effects when it's spread. You don't want any contractions. You want that completely spelled out, not spread. That's the word you have. Next, you want it completely spelled out. So, I'm not sure what you're saying. Effects when it is spread from person to person. I don't know if you mean side effects, or you may want to say, and what effects occur when it's spread, or what effects does it have, which would still work. Or if you say how it affects others when it's spread, that's where you would use AFF instead of UFF. So be clear with what you're saying here. Having this here is okay with the crucible. I don't necessarily like having your examples in the intro because your goal is to have a hook and have your hook be followed with information that builds on what your topic is about and then have a thesis. So this is a really good strong sentence. So the power of the brain can take over anything. The only way it becomes mass hysteria is due to its spreading, which this is a good thing to say. And then media is a big part of this and allows more people to be affected. So here's the problem as a reader. I started off saying the power of the brain and the only way it becomes mass hysteria is due to its spreading. Because you had this emphasis on the brain and it spread in whatever way, I interpreted that it was going to be part of human nature. But then you say this part about media. So be as clear as you can. Media is more potent in producing mass hysteria, or just straight out say it is human nature that is more potent in creating mass hysteria. You need to be as specific as you can. So your thesis needs to be specific. And then you need to maybe be a little bit more clear on what mass hysteria is. So as we move on, whenever hysteria takes place, it creates a distortion of the truth, unreasonable actions, even illogical thoughts. So I think this is a really, really strong topic sentence. And then you talk about media spreading around and blowing out of proportion. And then talking about the dancing plague of 1518. But what I would... Let's look at this. I don't know if this is necessarily media. But I also may have given you misinformation if I looked at this earlier, because when I looked at my essay, when you first gave it, I feel like I probably looked at this, so I'm going to give you a little bit of leniency. But this isn't necessarily media, but you talk about this spreading, but I don't think that's necessarily media. You have a good example here, and then people join in, and then you have this here, which is a good example on how this keeps coming out, but then it was actually polio, this polio outbreak that sent the girls into hysteria. The only problem is you have a really, really strong topic sentence, but you need to be able to tie in your paragraph back to both the topic sentence and your thesis at hand. And I guess I'm still not sure what your thesis is on it, because now I'm just getting a little more confused. But with that in mind, go on and keep talking about the distortion of the truth, because you have some good analysis or good evidence in here that will lead you to an analysis about how we react to our surroundings, and it's not really this that causes this, it's something else. So be mindful of that. I think you have something good here, but you are lacking the analysis component of your essay in this body paragraph. As we move on, I'm going to do that so I can put this all on one page. Your topic sentence does not work here. The newspaper, radio, social media, letters, the TV, and others were ways the media increased hysteria. The reason I don't like this is because radio, social media, TV, the whole shebang, these are all examples of media. So examples of media were ways the media increased hysteria. If you rephrase it that way, it doesn't make sense. So you need to consider that the topic sentence doesn't quite work here. But with that being said, I think you do a better job in this paragraph explaining some examples of mass hysteria having an outbreak. I don't know if I would say a big outbreak of, first of all, it's not the Ebola, it's just Ebola. That's like a big outbreak of the cancer. It doesn't quite work. So just a big outbreak of Ebola. So, where was I going with that? You are talking about how this is in the news and being spread, and this causes panic, and then you have this, and this is causing panic. So I think this does a much better job at using specific examples and then tying in with evidence about what it does. Let's talk about the grammar as well. You have some quotation mark concerns. This needs to be connected right to the word. Awkward spacing there. Awkward spacing here. You have a contraction, so be mindful of that. But I think this paragraph flows better than the previous one, so good job and kudos on that. For the next one, you talk about media isn't always the source of mass hysteria. You have the contraction, so people could tell their friends, blah, blah, blah. Allows story to change, manipulated, spiral into a disaster. Make sure you capitalize the crucible. And this is how mass hysteria is spread without media, and one of the most historical ones as well. The only problem with this is I'm still not clear with what your side is. I mean, this paragraph tells me that you're going with media is more potent in it, but you never explicitly stated it. Until you get to your conclusion, only makes media worse, spreads faster, whatever, anxiety. Wow. Anxiety and fear are powerful emotions. That's why people have hysteria. Contraction there. Several cases, distorted version of the truth. People feeling these things, but is an actual cause that makes people wonder, is it real? I think this is actually a pretty interesting way to end your paper. It makes people wonder, is it real? Because then I get something about really what is mass hysteria. So I think this is okay with how you have it here. But anyways, what you really need to do as we move here is you need to be explicit with what your position is. You need to be explicit with your analysis, because your first body paragraph, you don't really have analysis. And your third one, you're not refuting the opposition. So if this is the opposition, you need to come right out and say, hold on. Anyways, you need to come right out and say, where was I going with this? I am so sorry, Elena. I'm losing my train of thought. With your opposition, you want to address it, but then you need to counter it with evidence and analysis that supports your claim of it being more potent. So overall, improve your introduction and conclusion. Make it very specific what your thesis is, and build on that evidence and analysis a little bit more. And I think you are off to a better way for your rewrite as we go forward.